Last month, at a confirmation retreat, I was roasted for being a millennial by some of our 8th graders. When I revealed that I was born in the early 90s, their jaws dropped, they gasped, and they said, "You're a millennial? That's so embarrassing." They asked me a rapid-fire series of questions, including, have you ever taken a Harry Potter quiz? Have you ever used a hair straightener while your hair was wet? Yes, I have. Do you like avocado toast? And that last question struck a nerve with me. In 2017, a real estate millionaire told us millennials that the reason that we weren't able to purchase real estate was because we were wasting our money on avocado toast and overpriced coffee. Not because of ever-deepening income inequality, overinflated student debt, or housing prices rising faster than wages. No, it was our love of avocado toast. That was the primary barrier to us being able to afford homes of our own. My spouse and I are currently living in our 5th rental together after 3 years of marriage. Being the theology nerds that we are, we often joked that owning a home one day was our eschatological horizon. And so for anyone who isn't also a theology nerd, here's what that means. Call to mind one of your deepest hopes, one that you feel down to your bones. Sense the intensity, the urgency, the yearning, and the desire. Imagine that you're walking and walking and walking down a path, and just beyond the visible horizon lies the culmination, the fulfillment of that deepest desire. It's just beyond you. You can't quite see it, but you have faith that it's there. You may be exhausted from the long journey, but your faith that the fulfillment of that hope is just beyond what is visible, is just out of sight, is what drives you forward to keep going. Eschatology means the study of the final or ultimate things, the culmination, the fulfillment of all of our hopes and deepest dreams and desires. So the eschatological horizon is the hope that the deepest yearnings of our heart, our long-awaited hopes, lie just beyond the visible horizon, if only we journey just a little bit longer. So as we kept moving apartments, the fulfillment of our eschatological horizon began to shift. Instead of dreaming about homeownership, we began dreaming that maybe our next apartment will get direct sunlight at some point during the day. Maybe we'd be able to afford 2 bedrooms instead of one day. Maybe next time we'd get a responsive landlord when we told them that we had pests. And so, feeling like that final horizon would never approach, like the dream of home was unattainable for us, we settled for what we could. Avocado toast was the millennial manna, sustaining us in the wilderness until we finally arrived at that eschatological dream of home ownership. So if the eschatological horizon is us walking down the road, trusting that the fulfillment of our hope is just beyond the horizon, then Palm Sunday is when you have finally rounded the bend and you can see the end in sight. For many Jews in first century Palestine, the longing at the heart of their lives was also home, which they believed could only be possible through the military conquest, ending the brutal Roman occupation. Palm Sunday, then, is an enactment of that eschatological desire and the apparent fulfillment of that dream. For long generations, they had dreamed of the long-awaited Messiah, the one who would set them free and inaugurate the great Jubilee when all debts would be wiped away, when they would be liberated from bondage, and they hoped when their home would be theirs again. Many had hoped that Jesus would be the one to drive out the Roman occupation. They're approaching Jerusalem, and they're shouting, "Hosanna, save us now." There's an urgency in that hope. The eschatological horizon in sight, they're saying, yes, finally, our long-awaited home is finally here. We have made it at last. We will win ourselves a home. The palm branches they're waving evoke the celebratory feast of booths, or Sukkot, during which worshipers would process around the temple altar, rejoicing by waving palm branches as God had instructed Moses. You shall take branches of palm trees, and you shall live in booths, or temporary shelters made from the palms, for 7 days, so that your generations may know that I made the people of Israel live in booths when I brought them up out of the land of Egypt. In other words, the palm branches recall the Exodus and signal the people's joyful hopes that, like Moses, Jesus will lead them to a new Exodus and deliver them from bondage. It's the celebratory reenactment of the part of the Exodus story when the Israelites lived in makeshift shelters in the wilderness. The palm branches were deconstructed from the homes that recalled their long journey in the wilderness, their long sojourn in temporary housing. Palm branches reenacted and signaled the people's joyful hope that, like Moses, Jesus would embody and fulfill this new Exodus by delivering them from temporary housing into a permanent one. But here is the challenge of Palm Sunday. What happens when we arrive at what we think is our eschatological horizon? When we expect our deepest desires and our dreams to be fulfilled, but our expectations don't align with our material reality? When our dreams aren't actually fulfilled, how then do we respond? As I mentioned, my spouse and I have lived in 5 rental apartments and houses in 3 years of marriage. We have just started packing again for our 6th move because we closed on a house this week. And so we're technically homeowners now. So we move in early April, and so we are now in a strange in-between time. We kind of feel like we're living in a Palm Sunday space. The eschatological horizon that we have dreamed of for years is finally arising on the visible horizon. For a long time, I have imagined homeownership as the gateway to what a lot of sociologists will call ontological security. And what that means is, it's a fancy way of saying a sense that your being is safe and stable. Like the emotional foundation, it's the emotional foundation that allows us to feel at ease in our home and our environment, and at home in our housing. So even though my spouse and I are obviously both very excited to be approaching this long-awaited horizon, we're also trying to temper our expectations. Because as the book In Defense of Housing argues, ownership is far from the type of absolute status that we have in our mind. As is known all too well by the millions who have lost their homes to foreclosure, ownership is no guarantee of stability. We're trying to remind ourselves that home ownership is not the eschatological horizon we might have dreamed that it was. So Palm Sunday is an in-between time, the imminent promise that everything we've dreamed of is just about to be fulfilled. The excitement of Jesus' arrival is palpable, rippling through the crowds, but it then also might explain why the crowds turned on him so soon. The crowds hoped that the day of the Lord had arrived, that Jesus would lead them in battle to overthrow the Roman Empire, and through military might win themselves a home. The crowds were placing their hope in military liberation, and that was their eschatological horizon. So the question for us today is, what are we hoping for? Hope is a kind of longing, and the shape and quality of our longing is the shape and quality of our lives. We make our daily decisions about how to spend our time, and also the bigger, broader decisions about how to invest our other resources based largely on what we're longing for, what we're waiting for, or hoping for. If we're hungry, our hope is for bread. If we're captive, our hope is for freedom. If we're abused or exploited or oppressed, our hope is for sanctuary and justice and dignity. If we're an occupied people, our hope is for liberation from occupiers. If we're a people perpetually in exile, with insecure housing, our hope is in home. And so in this sense, our hope defines us. And Palm Sunday is a way that we embody that hope. And so here is the challenge of Palm Sunday. What happens when our dreams are realized and then we are inevitably disappointed? Traditionally, the eschatological horizon as Christians is our hope for the coming kingdom of God. It's the revolution, the dawning of a new world order marked by liberation from oppression and abiding ontological security. But on this side of the revolution, the eschatological horizons of our lives will inevitably disappoint us. Sometimes we will talk about the kingdom of God as the already and the not yet. The kingdom of God is not yet here, and yet we see glimpses of its coming arrival as beauty breaks its way into our midst. So when we reach the eschatological horizons of our lives and we're disappointed, it's because the fundamental world order has not yet actually changed. If we reach our eschatological horizon and then believe that the journey is over, that is what is called an over-realized eschatology. It's ignoring the not yet in favor of the already. And so how do we learn to live in the in-between time, paying attention to both the already and the not yet? I think of a story from Matthew Desmond's book, Evicted, about a woman named Lorraine. Stable housing, in her mind, was too distant an eschatological horizon to even dream about. Lorraine, he writes, imagined that she would be poor and rent-strapped forever. And if that was to be her lot in life, she might as well have a little jewelry to show for it. She wanted a bed no one else had slept in. She loved perfume and could tell you what a woman was wearing after passing her on the sidewalk. Even people like myself, Lorraine said, we deserve something brand new. So when Lorraine's food stamps kicked in for that month, she went to the grocery store and bought 2 lobster tails, shrimp, crab, king crab legs, salad, and lemon meringue pie. She ate everything alone in a single sitting, washing it down with Pepsi. The meal consumed her entire monthly allocation of food stamps. It was the anniversary of her husband, who had died of an overdose in prison. She wanted to do something special for the occasion, so she bought lobster on food stamps. This behavior baffled and frustrated the people around her. A pastor that had been supporting her said that she was careless with her money because she was operating under what he called a poverty mentality. Why didn't she make stable housing her eschatological horizon, he wondered. Lorraine lived alone in a trailer park. Before she was evicted, Desmond writes, she had $164 left over after paying the rent and lived on fixed income. If she had managed to somehow save $50 a month, nearly 1/3 of her after-rent income, by the end of the year she'd have $600 to show for it, enough to cover a single month's rent. And even then, saving $50 a month would have meant foregoing things like hot water and clothing. Desmond writes, people like Lorraine lived with so many compounded limitations that it was difficult to imagine the amount of good behavior, the amount of self-control that would allow them to lift themselves out of poverty. The distance between grinding poverty and even stable poverty could be so vast that those at the bottom had little hope of climbing out even if they pinched every penny. So they chose not to. Instead, they tried to survive in color, to season the suffering with pleasure. They might buy lobster on food stamps. Our actions reflect our hope. So to have faith that the world is in fact about to turn, to hope in this new world order that God has promised, we orient ourselves and our actions toward the kind of world we want to live in. For many like Lorraine, the hope of ontological stability is too distant a dream. And so instead, we orient our hope toward dignity and dignity becomes the eschatological horizon of our lives. Because if I can't have security, then at least I can have dignity. If Palm Sunday is to be the embodiment of our hope, then here is our challenge. What is it we are hoping for? And do our actions embody that hope? Would our bank statements, our budgets, and our calendars reflect our true values, what we're really longing for, and where our hopes really lie? And communally, what does our city budget and our federal budget reveal about our collective hopes for the world that we're longing for together? Are we orienting our hope toward military conquest, freedom through war? Or are we orienting ourselves toward a vision of the peaceable kingdom built upon liberation for all? If our hope is in the coming of the kingdom of God, then we look to evidence of the already breaking in to our midst, and we do what we can to support its arrival. We orient ourselves toward the kind of world that we long to live in. And for someone in Lorraine's situation, the coming kingdom of God is a world where all live with dignity. And so her actions are an assertion of her dignity. It's an embodiment of the hope of that eschatological horizon. For other young people who have been told all their lives that home ownership is the eschatological horizon toward which we must strive, despite more barriers than any other previous generation, maybe avocado toast is a similar expression of that dignity. We have been told over and over that war will bring us peace and private property will bring us security. So maybe these are not the eschatological horizons toward which we should be striving, toward which we should be orienting ourselves. Maybe for some of us, we look toward our budgets and our calendars and wonder, in what ways do I have the means to invest my resources and my time toward the coming kingdom of God? How can I be in solidarity with anyone who can't afford to look beyond an eschatological horizon, beyond dignity? And how can we accompany people who are living in undignifying housing conditions? How can we contribute toward their ontological security? How do we pay better attention to where the kingdom of God is already breaking into our midst and bolster these movements? So as we take a moment of silence to ask ourselves toward what our hope is oriented, may we take a moment to reflect. What am I hoping for? And do my actions reflect my hope for the coming kingdom of God?